Right, we have gone a bit far away from the design, but I think this difference between design and composition is a highly important notion. But to come back to more mundane and simple and almost banal things, I then developed these different domains where I tried to group the expressions that were dealing with design so that I can see all the different elements that would participate in the design process. And it came at least five. Design conditions as some kind of preset, what has to be there before the process, then the design personality, the very person who is doing it, the design as a process where it is not that just person but all the other things around it, then design as a result, whatever that might be, and then the last, which was clearly defined in criteria of validation, design realizations, process of assembly, process of building, rigorous process of realizing design, technical and environmental realization, where we become really material and object-like, which has probably nothing to do with design personality. This was how the preliminary set or typology of realities looked like. Initial ideas in design, design as personal activity to do with consciousness and skills of person, then assemblage of ideas, which is again very abstract, then drawings and models, which are basically part of understandable material world around us, but bear some significance or meaning of the design personality, and then the results, what they are used. So I made another generalization and took a position of a well-developed or already fully developed professional architect. So if there is the architect from the point of view of architect, how these realities would actually model. And then one can clearly see already the dichotomy between mind and matter, the consciousness of the designer and the reality that is seemingly outside of that consciousness, which then can be called either real world or not me. And this is how the polarization took place. So really the initial ideas, the design personal activity and assemblage of ideas can all operate in the realm of consciousness, imagination of a designing subject. Models of the design, the buildings, the realization of the ideas definitely does not belong into the same category. And then in between, which then I call the horizon of design, happens a particularly interesting events. So from one point of view, of course, we can imagine that I can design purely in my consciousness. When the design is ready and it's not too complex, I can build it. So the designer or the architect can do both of these things, but the result, nevertheless, happens to be in different categories. But usually we know, of course, there are these ideas that become sketches that become models and drawings, and then again ideas or representations as in the ideal form in the consciousness. And in that way, architectural design is a focus of consciousness. It's not happening all the time. It's happening only then when we focus ourselves to do this. And that is, of course, quite unique for every one of us. What are the mechanisms of designing? What is the language of designing? But nevertheless, we have to focus. So the design gets matured in this focus of consciousness, which does not definitely mean that there is no unconscious or other archetypal things happening in it. On the contrary, very often, in between the design process focus, some things get settled and we suddenly get a fully developed idea from the back of our mind. But nevertheless, if this process has to achieve some kind of results, as architecture, design, landscape architecture, and other design-related disciplines really deal with, then it becomes somehow objectified and written in some kind of language. But then again, up there we can clearly see that there are several things that are left out from this schema of two realities. It is the design team, it's the process of the design, it is the oral descriptions of design, it's the architectural descriptions. All of that, in a way, remain outside of this schema. And then, of course, we have to use the next big substance, hypostasis, which definitely is society. Of course, even here we have to be careful. But as I say, I took the starting point from the consciousness of the designer. So the social reality, of course, has formed the consciousness of the designer already. So it is not. So it is not a fully developed, but a temporal cut between the process of the development of designer. Because previously, before the design personality developed, it of course already was educated, was influenced by the society, both as culture and as institution. So the norms, the laws, the expertise, criticism come from the society as institution, but everything else, which is probably even more important, comes from the society as culture. And the interface between these two realities is just the language. And with the language, of course, we come to another complexity that the language is there before we actually can realize what language is, because we learn it very early. It's called mother tongue, because this is how mother brings up the infant. It is usually the mother, and mother can tell when the language is there what she knows about the world. So it is not just the world as discovered by us, but it is already pre-given with the mother tongue, and then it is pre-given by the schooling within the social reality or society with all kinds of languages. And these languages, of course, can be text, they can be oral, they can be natural languages, which we are using here, a different language than I usually speak in. And of course, film, video, books, all of these elements become part or the elements of the horizon of language. And when we think clearly about the design process, it really happens where the language, horizon of language and horizon of design come together. So very much what we design is explained to the customers or to someone else, is explained through different language. The fantastic part of this language is that their words are not defined. Different words can be used, and these words are ephemeral, they are poetic, they are also local. This word might not mean the same thing in the next dialogue between the client and the designer, or teacher and the student. So the language becomes extremely personalized within when it is overlaid to the design horizon, where the ideas take their form, whatever the form we give them. So it is this horizon of design where in the focus of mind several things happen. And of course there are intuitive ideas, there are feelings, there are focused ideas, there are images, the mental images we might say, sounds, whatever the mind of the designer really, whatever form it takes. But then there are representations of these feelings, design ideas, and mental images. And they become alienated or externalized by different means. Usually they are common languages. The most common of the languages, of course, is the language of image. But then, of course, it is also architectural drawings, it is the descriptive geometry, and all of these elements that we have been taught without really knowing what we have been taught about. And as probably referred already previously, I think this design paradigm started in 1428 and is at the end of its development now. Now we are going to use different tools for design. But this is by Filippo Brunelleschi, 1428, Santo Spirito in Firenze, and Brunelleschi has been awarded the invention of one focus perspective, and this is the image. And we can clearly see that the image describing the space there and the space described by a photograph have similarities. There are several things that are so similar that we can recognize this drawing already. Or we can have from this drawing a preview, an intuition, what if this building was built, what it would look like. And all of it, in a way, is built on an imagination that there is a membrane in front of us, and we don't use the two eyes of bipolar vision, but we look from the focus, like from the focus of our mind, outside into the world. And what made Brunelleschi's, there have been several drawings of that kind beforehand, of course, but what made Brunelleschi's invention so important was he was showing how geometrically plan and section and the perspective drawings are related. They are related in clear geometrical ratios. So it is there. So I can imagine that there is a spatial object. I can describe it in the form of image. I can make that image from different sides because the image is there in my mental eye. And I can go much clearer. I can explain it through this Cartesian space, through the sections of this imaginary space as membranes, how it can be constructed, which makes it fixed, ideally fixed from the mind into the reality. And then, of course, there are guys who build it up, and gradually it evolves, gradually according to these lines it becomes established, and then there it is. So the process, and this is the process of design horizon, it goes back and forth between the pure consciousness of the mind and then the descriptions of the design in different formats. And the last description, of course, is building it in the reality, in the real space, which has been alienated from the concept, from the consciousness of the designer, and it is there. And to more or less, most of the people see it in a similar way when it has objectified like that. And when we look at these two different images, we clearly see that something that was purely conscious and purely mind-like has gathered ontological energy in being there. So that is the two extremes of the design horizon, where the design becomes fixed and alienated. But now if we look back to it, we have to understand, or we have at least to imagine, that there is another horizon in existence there. It is the horizon of existence. When looking at that, which was photographed as the reality, it enters again into the imagination of ours. We actually get to know about the real world through these images. So as much as the design horizon from the well-developed design personality can be seen from one direction, then the whole process of epistemology, how we can know about the world, is the other way around. And this is how it develops well, it has been developed for us in a very early stage, but we touch things, we see them, we taste them, and then gradually the reality takes that form. It takes that form because everything that is there is somehow constructed by the mind. And of course here one has to make several simplifications, because the reality, of course, is a construct of the mind. So although it is for most of us, it is intuited and imagined the same way, there are differences. And of course these differences come from epistemological settings. They come from the culture, the institution, but nevertheless most of us operate on two modes of consciousness, that is space and mind, which are their focus, really the grounding of the focus of the mind. And due to that, human mind in a way is rather similar, at least in recognizing most of the world. But now when we have found that on the horizon of design there is the other process, or the direction of the process can be different, then we have to allow that there are actually three horizons. The horizon of existence with the modes of space and time, which we can see here, and the non-I, or the brutal reality, the build, has been pushed forward. And here I have established not a new reality, but a mode of that reality of other human beings, either the builders or the observers, the people who stand by, or even the design personality up there operating in different time moment as observer of the same design process he or she has been part of. So we see that architectural or any other design process as a phenomena then really starts from the design personality, horizon of design and building, and then becomes alienated as a thing in itself, or the reality out there. And then the architectural phenomena, then these are quite different from the process of alienation of design. And then through this observing part of the subjective reality, it becomes, through language, again, a part of society. Society as a whole cannot take really into account the reality itself, but it has to agree on the language basis. Of course, there are some differences there where things become existential, like football games or revolutions or some other religious events where there is no language horizon, but the language horizon has been before, and only then the society or the communion can take similar standpoint. So on the horizon of design, these concepts and ideas have been described in a special language, and then they are read out from that special language, and then the whole collective really takes part in it when it is built, observed, evaluated, and it becomes a part of social reality. So in a way, here different parts of that process really appear in different cycles. But what about education? If we take this, and this model is not a model of developing design personality, but it is the cut within the existence of design personality. But if we take, for instance, education, we see that this model really shows how it is distorted. In process of teaching and studying, the objective reality as thing in itself, the pure matter, and the social reality do not operate the same way as in design processes in developed design career or in design practice. Instead, there is a specific observer, the teacher, which is similar to the student or the designer. But within this design process, of course, language is extremely important. And then their existence is important, which come to the student only through the images of their teachers. So they are distorted. So and in very rare occasions, the reality and the society will participate in design projects of students, and then of course it is highly recognizable that these things happen. So I'm not going to talk too much about it because that is not really the theme of our lecture today. But definitely I think we have to be aware that each of the teachers has their own imagination of reality and the society. And the more we have these distorted views, the better we can learn from the school. But now coming back to the main theme of our lectures, the screen, the emergence of digital reality, how would this, and I asked myself, how would this type of model, how would these realities that are structured with these relationships, how would they operate when we allow the speculation that a major rupture happened between 2005 and 2013. And from the previous lectures, then we can imagine that this model starts to change. It is the case that nearly all the languages have taken the format of a screen. So even this is a rare occasion. I'm standing here and talking to you, but not necessarily. You can easily also record it and look at my recording on the screen. So this is a rare occasion. Usually it does not happen. And very soon, when the digital reality takes over, it will not happen like that. The teaching or the lectures or presentations will come through the screen. So the languages, in a way, are compressed into the format of the screen, which so far has been, as we looked, two-dimensional surface, where the proportional system of perspective build-up is embedded, whether we like it or not. The same happens to the design horizon. We cannot really design anymore with paper and pencil, which is possible, but which is highly inefficient. So the screen, the interface to the digital reality will take over the horizon of design. And the horizon of design then imposes from the software the type of perspective systems or the other constructs that are part of it. So it embeds already several things that we do not know and very often do not pay any attention to. So in a way, the languages, the language horizon and the design horizon tend to come together in the format of the screen. And that actually happens with the horizon of existence. So how we get to know the world is more and more through the augmented reality, or at least this is how I imagine it will be. It is the case that we can't avoid existential horizon to be embedded in digital realities because of the Internet of Things, where already every corporeity is fixed with tags, marks, signs, and talk to each other in some kind of protocol that has been forced. So in 2020, which is not so very far, as we have seen from the previous lecture, we already see how these changes are taking place in quantitative numbers, and that definitely builds up a totally new quality within the world. So, in my understanding, the horizon of existence, design, and language that were kept separately for 600 years, at least in the education of architecture, but I assume the same in design, is going to change because all over the place there is this digital reality in the format of a screen. And we also saw that the image of the screen is in the stage of disappearing or becoming something else, where we only partly start to understand the imagospheric condition where there are so many images surrounding us. These images already now tend to become internalized and also existentialized. So it is, if we think of it now, the design horizon is already polluted by this understanding where we really do not see where our mind ends and where the images and representations start. So we probably need to redraw this schema and say that all the horizons really tend to fuse together, hybridize, they become hybrid, and the digital reality comes in the form of these hybrids. And at the moment it is developed unevenly. Some of the elements are there, like Google Maps and Google Earth, whereas some of the parts of the reality have not been digitalized like that. But definitely with the forthcoming of major amount of quantity being added, I really had this image of these different realities becoming just small focus or small nucleus within this huge digital reality, which is the plenitude of information. As an example, already today, where the plenitude of information probably has not fully developed, the big companies hold back the information they have. It's not open, but already from the public sources, nearly everything can be known. Recently, the next military Russian agent whose face was there was recognized, and even though there is a conspiracy of the intelligence services, the face is there. It can be recognized in the millions and billions of images. This can be recognized, so everything will be known. So therefore, I think it is in the case of these realities, subjective origin, objective origin, and social origin, they become smaller and smaller. They become the real nucleus of these ideas, whereas the digital reality is taking it over. And they are just one personality, but then the different realities can be built within that the representation of digital reality. And we have a overpowering surface or space of digital reality that will overwhelm everything there is.